Your own needs, folks. Do it at your own pace in your own way. That's the key to life. So we drove back to the rig. I threw some shrimp on the barbie. Relaxed for the evening. And the next morning we headed out to Fall Creek Falls in Tennessee. It was a 3-hour drive. And we drove into Central Daylight Time. We arrived at our campsite, $20 a night with water and electric. I'm sorry, $29 a night for water and electric. The jacks worked fine. Yay. Cheers, everyone. We got set up. We searched out a hiking trail on Avenza Maps, and we found one that we could walk to from the campground. It was a beautiful walk to a really beautiful waterfall and a swinging bridge that went over the waterfall and a nice visitor center. So from there we asked for suggestions of other hikes, and she gave us, she suggested a couple of different hikes. So our walk from the campsite turned into a 6-mile hike that we weren't prepared to do, but it was just that beautiful. Great park to visit. So the next day we did 2 different hikes with a total of 7.5 miles. A lot of the trails you can access from trailhead parking, and a lot of the waterfalls you can almost drive to them. Very short walks if you wanted to do that. So we saw a waterfall that is the largest, highest waterfall east of the Mississippi. So that was pretty cool. The next day we had a confusing 3-hour drive with the rig to our next campground. We kept driving in and out of Central Standard Time and Eastern Standard Time. So according to the GPS, the Garmin GPS we use, our arrival time kept changing. But, oh well, and it was odd because we were driving north, and so the road just kept, whatever tower we were pinging off of was either in Eastern Time or Central Time. So I pulled out a map and I looked at the line for Eastern and Central Time zones, the dividing line, and it goes north through Tennessee, and once it hits Kentucky, it makes a left-hand turn. It goes east-west. It goes from the line, actually goes west, but it goes horizontally. Interesting. So we arrived at Bandy Creek Campground, which is in Bandy Creek National Park, which is in the Great South Fork River Recreation Area, which is in the Daniel Boone National Forest, which is in the Cumberland Mountains. Whew. We've been driving around. We saw Cumberland Mountains everywhere. North Carolina, Tennessee, and now in Kentucky. So apparently an explorer way back when fell in love with the area and named it after somebody back in England by the name of Cumberland. So this whole stretch of mountains, which is kind of like the Shenandoahs or the Adirondacks or the Catskills. So it's a whole section of mountains called the Cumberland Mountains. So it could lead to a little bit of confusion. We were on Route 90 And I'll tell you what, from now on, we're going to try to avoid Route 90. It was a smaller local road that it was either going uphill, downhill, or around bends the whole time. Not a great ride in a motorhome. But we got set up, walked around the campground, we talked to a park ranger, we got some tips for hikes. That night it was near 70 degrees at night. So we didn't leave enough of the windows open, and it made for a very warm and rough night's sleep. The next morning, we drove about about a half hour to the Twin Arches. We did a 3-mile hike, and we hiked into the largest arch east of the Mississippi. Now, a couple years ago, we were at Carter Caves in Kentucky, the northeast part of Kentucky, a state park, and there was arches there, and they were big and they were beautiful. But this is a huge one. And a quarter of a mile away from that arch, the largest arch east of Mississippi, is a second arch, which is equally impressive. So we then did a 8-mile hike on the Great South Fork River. It's a beautiful area. We thought we were hiking to a waterfall, but there wasn't one. But anyway, it was a long hike. The campground is really big where we were staying, and at $25 a night for water and electric, not bad. So the next day, we packed up, drove north again, crossed back into Central Time, and arrived at Jellystone Campground, about 15 minutes away from Mammoth Cave National Park. We had water and electric for $35 a night. The campground is really big, and lots of attractions for kids, activities for kids, which is typical of Jellystone parks. Now, we're here midweek, late April, and it was empty. There was I think 3 other campers, and it's so odd. They put us in a loop by ourselves. The 3 campers were dispersed between another loop, and where we parked, it was on a sloping hill, and it was terrible. We couldn't get level, and we ended up having to move to another site. So the loop ran up and down a hill, and basically they leveled out the sites just a little bit, but not enough. I have pictures that I'll post of the campground. I'm going to post it on their Google Maps location. This way other people can see how bad the slope was. And walking around the campground, we noticed there was garbage strewn almost in every site. Little pieces of garbage and wrappings, and I mean, yeah, it's off season, so that would give the employees more time to clean up, I would think. I don't know. So, our other choice for a campground in the area was the national park, but when it was going to be in the it was the upper 80s the other day, we wanted 30 amp for the AC. In the national park, their sites are 25 and 8, but they have no services and limited generator use. So that's why we ended up at Jellystone. So next day, we drove over to Mammoth Cave. We took the Dome and Dripstone tour. It was like 2 hours long. You had to go up or down 500 stairs. You went 270 feet down in elevation. And this was an awesome tour. It really gives you an appreciation of the size of the mapped cave system. To get to the entrance, we had to take a bus from the visitor center, about 5 minutes or so. Just really cool. So in that 2-hour tour, we saw 1/4% of the mapped cave. Unbelievable. In the visitor center, they have a map of the cave that's been explored and mapped and all that. And our campground, 15 minutes away, is on top of that cave. Cave City, the next big town away, is on top of the cave. It's a mammoth cave. So I'll put a link to the pictures from the tour that we just took, I just told you about, in the show notes on Instagram. The link is there. So that evening we did the Star Chamber Lantern tour. We had this reserved for the next night, and which means we would have had to come back 2 days to Mammoth Cave. And Trish suggested that we move this tour to this evening so we could do the 2 tours in one day and just spend 1 full day at Mammoth, and it worked out beautifully. So this one was done in darkness. They didn't have any lights at all. It was 2 miles long, 2.5 hours, and you carried Coleman gas lanterns. Really cool way to do a tour in a cave. They talked about some of the history there. You could see an old tuberculosis room that was built in the cave for patients with tuberculosis to help them heal and all of that. It was a different time back then, folks. So I'll put a link to the pictures from that tour in the show notes too. So Mammoth Cave has a bunch of different tours. They use 6 different entrances to the tours, and I'll put a link to their page of the description of each of the tours in the show notes for you. Each of the tours at this time, this is early May, we're here like 3 or 4 weeks before Memorial Day, and each of the tours were only maybe halfway full, which is why we were able to switch nights for our reserve tour. They say that during the summer, you need to reserve a tour like 2 to 3 weeks in advance. And every tour, they say, is full to capacity. So, again, nice being here in the shoulder season. We went over, so in between the 2 tours that we did, we had a bunch of hours to kill. and I knew there was hiking there.